By the time the sun bled itself thin over Dustwater, a widow stood alone on land every man wanted, and a scarred drifter rode in with nothing to trade but his aim, and whatever pieces of a conscience he hadn't pawned. Part 1. Dustwater at Dusk. Samuel Hart rode west beneath a sky the color of hammered tin, where the heat pressed against the earth until it cracked and groaned like old leather. The horse beneath him was weary, ribs showing with each breath, but it carried him because both man and beast knew there was nowhere else to go. For hours the land had stretched without mercy, sagebrush, mesquite, a scattering of rocks that looked like they had been tossed there by a careless god. The road was only a faint scar across the dust, yet Samuel kept to it because sometimes a scar was the only map left. He had left behind towns where the smell of whiskey clung to him longer than work ever did, and faces that remembered debts he could not pay. His boots bore dust from 3 counties, his coat was faded with old sweat and sun, and the colt on his hip was the only honest thing he owned. There was no destination written in his mind, only the small need for water, a bed of any kind, and silence deep enough to smother the noise of memory. By late afternoon the road bent toward signs of habitation, thin smoke climbing from chimneys, a scatter of roofs crouched beside a dry arroyo. The crooked boards of a sign announced the name in letters the wind had gnawed nearly to nothing. Dustwater. Samuel let the name settle on his tongue. It tasted of grit and resignation. The street of Dustwater was little more than a spine of warped boards and hardpan. A boy swept dust that returned as quick as he pushed it aside. A mongrel dog lifted its head, sniffed, then lay back down with the kind of indifference only animals and old men could afford. Women in bonnets moved quickly from store to wagon, eyes lowered, as if carrying secrets too heavy to share. Samuel reined his horse before the livery, slid down with the limp that came when the weather changed, and tied off the reins. Every porch watched him. That was the way of frontier towns. A stranger was a stone dropped in still water, and the ripples kept going long after the splash. Samuel kept his hat low, shoulders loose, the posture of a man with nothing to prove but nothing to lose either. He walked toward the saloon, the only building that seemed awake, its door swinging like a slow pendulum. Inside, the air smelled of stale beer and old smoke. Light slanted through shutters, cutting the room into narrow slices of gold and shadow. The bar was a long plank, scarred and polished by 100 elbows. Men hunched over cards at the far table, faces hidden beneath sweat-stained brims. The barkeep, a lean man with rolled sleeves and a scar bright as chalk along his forearm, glanced up, but said nothing until Samuel laid 2 coins on the counter. "Water first," Samuel said. "Whiskey after." The barkeep poured, the glass cloudy but serviceable. Samuel drank slow, letting the metallic tang sit on his tongue. He was not a man who hurried thirst. "You headed through or headed for?" the barkeep asked finally, voice casual but edged with curiosity. "Don't know yet," Samuel replied. "Town got a sheriff?" "Got Pike," the barkeep said. "More than a sheriff, less than a friend." Samuel let the words rest between them. "And the widow?" The barkeep's hand slowed in its wiping. His eyes shifted toward the far corner where 2 ranch hands played cards badly. When he looked back, his face had the look of a man testing thin ice. "Clara Whitmore," he said. "Husband died last winter. Land's near worthless unless you know what dirt to buy. Sheriff's got a map, says the railroad wants to run right through her spread." Samuel tipped the glass back, but did not touch the whiskey beside it. He pushed the coin back across the bar. "Where's her place?" The barkeep lifted his chin toward the door. "Ride out of town till you start thinking about who you used to be. When the regrets come heavy, you're close." Samuel said nothing more. He stepped outside, mounted, and rode. The land beyond Dustwater was a page bleached near blank, the lines faint with wear. By the time he saw the Whitmore ranch, evening had begun to lean across the sky. Fences stood patched with whatever could be hammered into the ground. An old cottonwood bent tiredly near the well. The house bore the ghost of paint, peeled and weathered, a place that had once believed in permanence but had been taught better. Samuel noticed the riders before he noticed the woman. 3 of them, posted in a fan at the gate, their horses restless beneath the heat, their hats tilted low, their posture loose, but the kind of loose that belonged to men who knew violence could arrive at any minute and welcomed the chance. A burned V marked one saddle skirt. Samuel's gut tightened. Red vultures. He had crossed paths with their kind before, carrion men who circled weakness until they could tear a strip off. The woman came from the house carrying a bucket, tall, straight-backed, sleeves rolled above strong arms, hair braided close. Widow, Samuel thought immediately. It clung to her the way dust clung to boots. She placed the bucket down gently, as if noise itself might draw trouble nearer. Afternoon, the middle rider called, his smile too wide. Fine land for one woman to mind. It minds itself better without boot heels on it, she said. Her voice rasped against the wind but carried steady. The rider tipped his chin. Name's Binks. Some call me Red when I make time for them. Heard tell you're ready to sell. You heard wrong. Then I'll say it plain. He leaned against the horn of his saddle. We want to buy. There's men with money enough to be kind about price, if kindness gets them what they need. The widow's mouth hardened. What they need is my table, my bed, my husband's boots by the door. Men buy land first, then everything the land taught someone to love. Binks laughed, the sound dry as brush. Your husband's boots don't stand by the door anymore, Mrs. Whitmore. They're planted in the ground. We're offering you a chance to keep what's left. Samuel eased his mare under the cottonwood, watched with eyes that had measured trouble before. Trouble had legs here. The widow Clara lifted the bucket again, small defiance in the motion. I told Pike last week and I'll tell you now. I sell when I choose, not when fear chooses for me. Binks sighed. Last time we asked gentle. Tomorrow it's wire cutters and long matches. We'll burn just enough to teach you the word yield. Samuel nudged his mare forward, casual, as if only searching for shade. He tipped his hat. Afternoon, and Macon Tims's browed. Binks's eyes narrowed. You got business here, stranger. Water's any man's business in summer. Mrs. Whitmore's water is hers. Samuel dismounted slow, favoring his leg, set his hat on a post. I'll pay for a drink. Clara studied him. She saw the blue of his eyes, cold as winter, and the wear of a man who had broken something in himself once and kept living anyway. You can have a dip, she said. Return it with thanks. Samuel pumped water. The mare drank. The riders watched, the theater of power unbroken. Samuel let the light find his colt briefly as he straightened. He never touched it, only showed it lived. Binks's smile thinned. Don't play a tune you can't finish. Asking intelligent store to find. Samuel looked skyward. Even the worst songs run out of verse. The riders turned at last, dust curling behind them. The ranch fell quiet but not safe. Clara carried her bucket to two struggling saplings, poured water at their roots, and turned to Samuel. I don't hire men with gun histories, she said. I don't hire out much. Just ride till the day breaks thin. You haven't ridden far enough. He gave half a smile. Maybe not. She nodded toward the south lot. They cut fence last week. Left their V burned. Pike came after. Told me to think about changing weather. Samuel spat neat as punctuation. And you told him? That weather belongs to God. But men with matches make their own. He touched the brim of his hat. Name's Hart. Samuel. She looked him over again. Clara Whitmore. I reckon you already knew. He followed her to the steps but no further. On the wall by the door hung boots heavy with dust, leaned to the right by the ghost of their owner. Clara's eyes flickered toward them once, then away. By nightfall Samuel had mended fence with hands that remembered better days. Coyotes cried on the ridge. Clara sat with a ledger, numbers cruel in lamplight. She closed it when Samuel came near. You know how to read accounts? She asked. I know how to read what's dying, he said. And when to say so. What do they say? This was well the strangs of this why. You need $10 for every one you have. Seed, doctor. Arrears on the note. Even if the well keeps, the ground is taking more than sky gives back. Her voice broke quiet. What I needed was Thomas to live long enough to teach me the rest. He held his hands still, rough palms yearning but disciplined. Later, in the dark, she spoke again. The night Thomas died, a man came. Not a doctor. Blue coat. Railroad smell. Asked to see the deed. Said, Ma'am, there's a lot of future under your porch. He promised he'd be back when morning taught me manners. Samuel's jaw set. Pike knows this? Pike knows everything that tips a hat to money. Samuel did not answer. The night held them both, and the silence between was thick as rope. Out on the ridge, a dog barked once, then again, sharper. Hoofbeats followed, faint but certain. By dawn, riders would come, Sheriff Pike among them, and Dustwater would remember this night for the way silence broke. Part 2. Whispers of the Past. Morning cut the horizon thin and bright. Clara worked the pump with sleeves rolled. Samuel walked the south fence because motion kept thoughts from souring. He found a left-hand glove cheap hide, palm stitched with horsehair near a neat cut in the wire. A lost glove meant a man close enough to touch and likely to return. By the time the sun cleared the ridge, dust rose on the road. Sheriff Pike arrived with 2 town men and their roll of paper. Binks and his pair came minutes later, lazy as cats that already owned the yard. The clerk unrolled a survey against a saddle. The dark line of the railroad cut straight through the square that was Clara's house. A penciled, gentler route looped south and back, the kind of alternative men argue for and then lose. "You know why we're here," Pike said. "Lawful paper, fair money. Let the future pay for the trouble." Clara stood on the porch with the rifle light across her arms. "No." Binks smiled. "Tomorrow it's wire cutters and long matches." 2 young surveyors rode up from the north pasture, one with a tripod strapped like a cross. "We were told you'd be ready to sign," the clean hat called. Pike's face didn't flicker. "Clara told them to wait by the arroyo." Samuel took the tripod and set it gently against the fence. "Place it on my land and I'll push it over," Clara said. "Then I'll give you water so your foolishness doesn't kill you." The boys retreated, trying to look unruffled. "Numbers make sense," Pike pressed. "You cannot eat no. Chairs are for sitting and thinking," Clara said. "I do both better without company." She sent Samuel for an iron box hidden under a mule harness. On the porch, she opened it. Deed, a browned marriage paper, a hand-drawn map, and a small black book. Thomas Whitmore's map had crosses for water and, in the margin, a note soft as a secret. "Shallow vein coal, black seam near the Cottonwood draw." Pike bent to spite himself. Clara opened the little book. Rainfall and calf counts sat beside entries about a winter visit from a railman who smelled of oil and paper. Right-of-way demands widened until they would slice wind from the house. A darker hand added, "Pike says it's good. Later, not good. Brought men at night. Binks with scar. Law can be taught to walk with the iron if iron teaches it to eat." One last smear, then the word written, crossed out, written again. "Matches. Books say anything if you let grief read them," Binks said. "He wrote your name earlier," Clara answered. Crossed it out. "Men forgive more than they should. I am not my husband." Pike recovered his mask. "Coal is another reason for this path. The train brings buyers who know how to use black seams." "Shame," Clara said, "is a private tax people pay to sleep without lawyers in their dreams." Samuel left the porch. Near the Cottonwood, the ground had been freshly tamped. A heel print leaned right. The glove in his belt matched. He looked up and found Binks watching him watch the dirt. "Lose something?" Samuel asked. "Just interest," Binks said. Pike gathered the paper. "Tomorrow, noon. I'll come alone." He meant to look at Binks and didn't. Binks lingered long enough to inventory Clara's yard with his eyes. "Pride burns faster than dry grass," he told her. Then rode off with his pair, unsewing the dust behind them. "Thomas knew," Clara said when they were alone. She let the journal sit in her palm like a warm stone. "He thought if he didn't write it clean, it might make less truth." "Weak men write softer than their fears," Samuel said. They hid the box where matches wouldn't find it beneath the apron stone of the well, double-wrapped in canvas, rope coiled on top to make the place look used and ordinary. The dog watched with the grave attention of creatures who understand secrets. "There's more in the barn," Clara said. In a feed bin hidey-hole she had once filled with nails, she had found a folded scrap. Samuel opened it. "Pike says burn the deed," scrawled in a hasty hand. "If real, he came not as law," Samuel said, "but as a man carrying fear. Burning a deed doesn't move a fence. It erases proof, turns land into a story instead of a fact." The day settled into the nervous work of waiting. Samuel moved a barrel of water to the yard's corner, set sand by the steps, hung lanterns where a knock would light warning but not the house. He strung a trip rope low along the wash and set a pitchfork where a fool would find it with his ribs. The 2 survey boys loitered and left after Samuel told them a detailed lie about a bull snake with a love of boots. Near dusk, a rail hand rode from the wash, hat tipped, caution in his voice. "Name's Keen. I hammer spikes by trade and sense into men who carry them by second choice. Pike isn't the worst. He's tired and thinks that makes him right. Telegraphed word says a federal deputy's riding through on the Morrison case. That means Pike's alone will come with a shadow. He sent a note to Binks instead of to you. He added that last winter Thomas had brought their camp a map, made like a love letter. Keene told him sweat, a year of bad news, and maybe a payout if he lived long enough. Thomas had laughed and said it was better than the bank offered. If I were arranging a night, Keene said, nodding toward the lay of the land, I'd set 2 boys in the wash, a scar counter on the ridge, and a fool near the hay. Come tomorrow for water if the house is still standing, Samuel said. Keene promised 2 spikes and a story, and vanished into the gray as if cut from it. Clara decided to move papers to Mrs. Daly's store. Men in Dustwater have forgotten how to ask permission behind flour sacks. She would leave word that if Pike wanted talk, it would be in front of the church bell, with the town listening. She went by the gully, skirts tied, fear trimmed to a useful size. She returned with dirt on her knee, a curl stuck to her temple, and a jar of peach preserves. Hope in a jar, she said. They sat at the table while the house made night sounds. She told 2 stories of Thomas that weren't sad. He told one about a depot that smelled of oranges for a week. Silence settled, polite and elbowless. Near midnight the dog looked at the door and then at Samuel as if the hour had done its math. He stepped out. The cottonwood was a black idea. The trough held a corner of starlight. By the hay, a shadow tried to be part of another shadow. Samuel picked up the pitchfork and lay its shaft across the opening. The boy's chest found it and grunted the small regret of arriving late to his own caution. Easy, Samuel said. We can teach you better work than this. Out in the wash a man tripped where rope knew how ankles travel. From the ridge came the almost click that is only a measured breath through teeth. Samuel tilted his head toward that deeper dark. The ridge is awake. Clara lifted the rifle into the crook of her shoulder. So is the porch. A thin bell rang somewhere toward town, not church. Something smaller struck by a nervous hand. It carried wrong and made every man in the yard listen the same way. That'll be Pike's shadow, Samuel said. He'll want the town awake enough to rehearse accident. Then we won't, Clara answered. Samuel took the pitchfork away and set it back where a hand could find it in daylight without admitting it had. Go home, he told the boy. Tell your man this hay belongs to a widow who knows where to stack it. Come back and you'll stack your own for a week with a back like a question mark. The boy looked at Clara and found yes in her face. He vanished into the dark. The ridge breathed and chose not to shoot. Samuel felt the decision the way a change in weather sits on skin. Inside, the house waited. Outside, the night decided it could end without proving anything else. They stood on the steps a minute longer than needed. Dawn would bring Pike with a deputy whose badge shone too bright for a place that preferred its metals dull. Binks would find a new way to pretend patience. And under the well's apron stone, wrapped tight against match and weather, a box with a map and a stubborn little book would wait, heavy as law, heavier than it carrying a man's unspent truth into whatever the morning chose to believe. Part 3. The Lawman's Shadow. Dawn cut sharp across the prairie, making every shadow honest. Samuel had been awake since gray first spread. He walked the south fence, thumbed the knots on the trip rope in the wash, and studied the ridge where a patient rifleman might wait. The signs were faint, but the memory of last night's watchers remained. Inside, Clara moved through her kitchen with sleeves rolled, her hair bound tight, no softness left in sight. When Samuel came in with dust still on him, she poured coffee and let him speak. We'll take it to town, he said. Under the bell, where Pike has to show his face with witnesses. You'll walk beside me, she said. I'll walk a ways behind. We'll look like errands that forgot each other. They set off staggered, Clara ahead with her satchel, Samuel behind with his limp. Dustwater stirred awake as if expecting the day to take sides. Faces peered from doorframes. The boy at the store swept the same figure eight he always did when trouble hovered. The church bell hung quiet until Clara pulled the rope. Its single toll rolled over the square, more notice than summons. People gathered anyway. They came because people always come when land and money are about to be argued. Pike rode in, badge shining newer than the man beneath it. At his side came a federal deputy, Ezra Calhoun, stiff as starch, hat tipped like a crown. Binks appeared from the livery's shadow, 2 men leaning nearby, lazy but alert. Samuel placed himself between trough and steps, watching the alleys and balcony the way a man checks whether he knows will change. Pike unrolled the paper. Mrs. Whitmore, The territory authorizes me to secure right-of-way. The survey marks the line. Compensation is fair. Sign, and let the future through. Clara looked not at the paper but at the crowd. You know my husband's boots. You know my well keeps neighbors alive. You know men came with matches. My answer is here where you can hear it. No, and it's never is whited. Murmurs moved across the square. Ezra lifted his chin. Refusal of lawful acquisition is obstruction under federal law. Daly, from the store porch, folded her arms. Obstruction is what you accuse a mountain of when your wagon breaks. Dustwater has seen process before. We burned 2 winters waiting on it. Clara spoke again, clear as bell metal. My husband's ledger shows a shallow seam of coal by the Cottonwood draw. That's why Pike called this line good. That's why Binks waits in my yard. This isn't progress, it's theft measured with paper. For a flicker, Pike's mask slipped. I didn't burn your deed, he muttered. Did you tell a man too? Clara asked. He breathed once, heavy. I arrange weather. Samuel took a step forward. Pike, if this goes wrong, it won't be numbers against you. It'll be the wrong arithmetic. Pike looked at the people. Daly's pencil. The store boy frozen with his broom. Samuel's cold eyes. Clara's hand on the bell rope. Slowly, he slid the survey back toward himself. We'll bend south. Let the company haul more iron. I won't turn your porch into a platform. Ezra stiffened. Pike held his ground. Tell Laramie the county still eats supper looking itself in the eyes. The crowd exhaled. But Binks's smile never bent. He stood easy, his men straightening by the livery gap. Progress bends, he said. But it snaps back. A jest of 50s ein. The first shot cracked from the saloon balcony. Wood splintered by the church door. Samuel's Colt answered. 1 round shattering the rail an inch from the rifleman's elbow. A curse, then silence above. In the alley a boy tried to shoulder a gun. Samuel shot dirt in front of him, grit blinding him. Daly named the livery fool loud enough to pin him where he stood. Pike had his pistol out. Ezra too. But Samuel had already made the air too costly for Binks's men. Binks clapped once. Mock applause. A lively liturgy. Then he tipped his hat, voice carrying. The line will come. The only question is whether it hums for you, or over you. He left without hurry, dust curling behind. The square eased back into breathing. Ezra holstered stiffly, muttering of wires and governors. Pike said only, Tell them we learned to bend a straight line. To Samuel, low. Move what you hid at the well. Binks will sniff it out quicker than you. Late honesty, but it weighed. Clara stepped closer. I want the new line on paper with signatures. You'll have it, Pike said. Ezra warned her against routine, then rode off brittle. When the town emptied, Clara and Samuel walked home apart like strangers. From the rise they looked down at the ranch, the cottonwood bowing, the fences patched, the house stubborn. Samuel said, You could still sell. I could, Clara answered. But then I'd still hear the train inside me. A hymn I never chose. By the time they reached the yard, the wind had shifted, carrying the resin scent that comes before fire. Samuel checked the well stone, barrel, sand, lanterns, the wire in the wash. He laid Keen's 2 spikes along the porch where they'd look like nothing. Clara shuttered the south windows, left a slit north for her rifle. Keen arrived with coil and grin. We'll lace a whisper by the coop. Men in a hurry wear it like jewelry. They worked in silence until the yard felt taut. Night drew in, still as breath held too long. The dog crawled under the porch. 3 men came, 1 soft, 1 clumsy, 1 certain. The wire caught the first, the second froze, the third struck both spikes and staggered. Samuel met him with the rifle stock. On the ridge, Keen's chain swung once. The silence that followed meant it had found its target. From beyond the cottonwood, Binks's voice floated. You bent a line today. Tomorrow I'll bring a curve you can't draw. Clara answered steady. Tomorrow the bell will ring until men are tired of pretending not to hear it. A match hissed in the dark, then pinched out. Keen towed the spikes and muttered, They'll try the barn next. They'll try fire, law, paper until a tool turns into a mirror, Samuel said. Bad for business, Keen replied. Good for living, Clara answered. The yard quieted, earned. Inside, boards settled. Outside, stars looked on. Clara said at last, Tomorrow we ride to the Cottonwood draw. If the seam is real, We'll decide the hymn ourselves. Samuel nodded. We'll take a pick. And a way to hide what we find. Keen pulled on his hat. I like my sleep. I'd like to keep liking it. When he left, Samuel checked locks, stone, rope. Clara slid her satchel under the bed. They lay down in rooms that had learned each other's breath. The house carried two truths without weighing them. The railroad would come, and how much of themselves it took away would be theirs to decide. Part 4. The Cottonwood Draw. The morning broke pale, with a hush that felt more like a warning than a gift. Samuel walked the yard before the sun climbed clear, checking every knot of wire, every post he had set the night before. Nothing moved except the dog, stiff from sleeping under the porch, and Clara, who came out with her hair loose down her back, a braid half finished and forgotten when she caught the smell of ash that still lingered. The night had been quiet after Binks's voice faded, but quiet was often a mask, and Samuel had learned long ago that silence can bleed into danger faster than noise. Clara joined him at the fence. We ride to the draw, she said. We'll take tools, Samuel answered. He strapped a pick and a spade across the mare, added a length of canvas, and tucked a small oil lantern into the saddlebag. Keen will meet us. He's not the kind to watch trouble from a distance when it promises to burn his camp next. They set out by mid-morning, Clara on a chestnut mare lean with age but steady, Samuel a pace behind on his gray. The land unrolled itself flat and cruel, the grass crisp to stubble, the stones hot even before the day ripened. The cottonwood rose at last from the wash like a survivor who refused to bow. Its branches threw shade enough for the horses, its roots drinking water deeper than most wells could reach. Keen was waiting, hat pulled low, spike hammer across his lap. Rail camp's restless, he said by way of greeting. Word spread about Pike folding his paper. Some call him traitor, others fool. Me, I call him late to decency. But it won't buy him quiet. The company sent telegrams before dust even settled. Samuel nodded. And Binks? Gone by morning, Keen said. But gone isn't the same as leaving. He'll circle back. Men like him don't lose interest in a thing that resists. They dismounted. Clara led them to the shallow gully Thomas had marked in his ledger. The ground there was darker, crumbly, streaked with veins not the color of common earth. Samuel sank the pick once, twice, until stone cracked and spat a shard black as midnight. He held it to the light. It gleamed faintly, greasy on the fingers. Coal, Keen said. Shallow and wide. Enough to tempt men who already see trains in their sleep. Clara took the shard, turned it in her palm. Thomas wrote of it, but I thought maybe grief had magnified his hope. He said the land would sing if the right ears listened. She closed her hand over the stone. Now I know why Pike came, why Binks circles, why strangers weigh my fences. This land doesn't just hold me, it feeds their hunger. Samuel studied the vein. If they know, they'll come harder. Coal means more than rails. It means furnaces, smelters, towns swelling fat overnight. Men will kill softer obstacles than a widow. Then we bury it, Clara said. She dropped the shard into the canvas and tied it shut. What Thomas found belongs to him still, and to me. Let the earth keep it until the world forgets to look. Keen squatted, tracing the seam with a dirty nail. You could sell it on your own terms. Not to Pike, not to the vultures. To buyers who don't need fire to bargain. It'd pay debts. Save the spread. Clara shook her head. It would buy coin but steal my peace. What good is money if it brings men's boots to my table every day until I choke on the sound of them? No, I'd rather carry hunger honest than feed on false plenty. They worked through the heat, covering the exposed streak, rolling rocks back into place, brushing the disturbed soil with willow branches until the earth looked untampered. By noon sweat slicked their clothes, but the seam was hidden again, its promise pushed back into silence. As they mounted to leave, Clara paused beneath the cottonwood. He wrote of this tree, she said softly. Said it would outlive him, and me, and maybe even the fence line. He asked me once, if the world tried to buy me piece by piece, would I stand with the tree or the coin? She brushed a hand along the bark. I gave him no answer then. Now I know. Vire wages of life. Back at the ranch, the yard held new visitors. Daly stood by the porch, arms crossed, two of her boys unloading barrels of water from a wagon. If the vultures mean to burn you out, you'll have more to fight with than buckets, she said briskly. And my boys will sit watch with rifles that don't ask permission. I didn't ask for soldiers, Clara said. You didn't, Daly agreed. But Dustwater needs to learn its spine. If we let Binks own one widow's yard, he'll own all our doors. Better to stop him here than watch him grow fat. Samuel caught Daly's gaze. The town will pay for this. Town always pays, Daly said. Might as well buy something worth the coin. Despairing the disagreements resumed. By evening, more neighbors drifted in. A rancher with a gimpy mule offered fence wire. A blacksmith sent a son with nails and a hammer. No speeches, just small contributions, like water poured into a common well. Clara accepted each with a quiet thank you, though her eyes betrayed both gratitude and a weight she didn't want to spread. Samuel saw the change. Dustwater, usually content to watch from porches, had decided to lean on the scale. For better or worse, Clara was no longer standing alone. The calm cracked at dusk. A rider came from town with dust thick on his coat. It was Pike. He reined in hard, slid from the saddle. Telegram came, he said, voice stripped of ceremony. The company's sending men. Not deputies. Agents. They'll be here by week's end. And they'll bring their own law to excuse whatever harm needs excusing. Clara's jaw set. Then Dustwater has less than a week to decide who it belongs to. Pike looked worn. Older by years than the day before. I can't fight them outright. Not in badge or title. But I can place truth in the open. Tomorrow I'll call a council, here or in town. If the town sides with you, the company will think twice before branding Dustwater as theirs. Samuel studied Pike. You'll risk your badge? I already have, Pike said simply. Might as well use it while it still shines. Clara nodded once. Bring them. Here, under the cottonwood. Let the tree that outlives us judge our words. Night came uneasy. The ranch bristled with borrowed rifles and lanterns set on fence posts. Samuel sat the south ridge with Keen, watching for sparks that might herald fire. Clara paced the porch, ledger open, then closed again, as if numbers could steady her. Past midnight, a noise carried a thin whistle, like a bird but wrong. Samuel stiffened. Shadows moved near the wash. 3 men again, maybe more behind. He signaled Keen, who loosed the chain he carried. The first intruder went down with a startled cry. Shots cracked, lanterns flared. Clara stood on the porch with her rifle, sending one round skyward before aiming true. Daly's boy fired from the hayloft. The vultures scattered but not empty-handed. By the time the yard quieted, one of Daly's barrels was burning, flames licking upward until Samuel and Keen smothered it with sand. Smoke hung, bitter and accusing. Clara lowered her rifle, chest rising hard. They'll come with more next time. They'll come with agents, Pike said grimly. Men who don't rattle when neighbors glare. Samuel laid a hand on the pump handle, grounding himself in the cool iron. Then tomorrow matters. The council. If Dustwater doesn't stand now, it won't stand later. Then nas cases of verst my werager of. Clara looked at him, then past him to the cottonwood rising black against the stars. Tomorrow we ask the town to choose its hymn, and pray they don't sell their ears. The dawn that followed did not feel like morning so much as judgment waiting. Wagons rolled from town, people coming not for curiosity this time but for something closer to resolve. The cottonwood shade filled with neighbors, wary yet present, while Clara stood by the well and Samuel at her side. Pike faced them, badge still pinned though tarnished by truth, and in the distance, Binks's riders circled like vultures indeed, waiting for the council to stumble, for pride to falter, for fire to win where words might fail. Dustwater's choice had arrived, and with it, the weight of a story that would not end with signatures on paper, but with the town deciding whether to bow or to stand. Part 5. Judgment at Sunrise. They came to the cottonwood because Clara had said so, and because some part of Dustwater still wanted to choose itself. The tree shouldered the early light like an old soldier. People edged into its shade with the careful gait of those stepping where the floor might be a trap. Dogs circled, counting in the honest way animals do. Clara stood by the well apron with the rope in her hand. Her hair lay straight, as if there wasn't time to make anything tidy that didn't need to be. Samuel kept to the porch corner, eyes measuring the town as if it were weather. Keen leaned on the pump post, a straw between his teeth. Pike arrived on foot, thinner than yesterday. He set a rolled map on the apron stone and faced neighbors who had changed his name's meaning overnight. Company men are riding, he said. They come to make what they want sound like what you owe. I propose a different sum. Daly stepped forward, ledger under one arm, a long spoon in the other. Speak it plain. We can't feed kitchens with speeches. Pike unrolled the map. The south-bending line traced a longer path around the draw and curved back to meet the company's ink. Costlier in iron, cheaper in soul, he said. Keene says it's buildable. If the town signs, the governor will have a time telling the company to choose the straightest line over the truest one. There is Nor's heaven dime. A murmur moved through the ring. And if they say no? A rancher asked. Then we bend days, Keene said. We make it slower to be stubborn than to be decent. Clara set Thomas's small black book by the map. In here he wrote rain and calves and a seam of coal near the Cottonwood draw. That's why they want a straight line. It's also why I won't sell a right-of-way past my porch. That seam belongs to my dead, to me, and to the children Dustwater decides are worth keeping. The crowd leaned toward her. In the gaps, Samuel marked quick eyes, and low hats the men Binks had paid to stand in shade. I won't recite law, Pike said. I can sign the alternative, carry it to Laramie with a list of names. Testify. Dustwater stands with it. Pay? The rancher asked. Truth and courage still have to eat. Daly tapped her ledger. Subscription. Water hauled. Nails. A day a month by every person who wants to sleep without hating themselves. Riders showed on the ridge, dust rising behind them. Ezra Calhoun led, agents in gray coats at his sides. He dismounted with official caution. Mrs. Whitmore, Sheriff, representatives of Brannan and Co. They will inspect your proposal. The lead agent flicked dust from his gloves. Ransom, Western Division. His eyes priced the yard. We will take the straight line. The territory authorized right-of-way. By whom? Clara asked, not moving. By the company's agents, Ransom said. Already bored with her door and well. Ezra shifted. Ransom, the county stands here. Don't trample it. The county, Ransom replied, is a unit on a ledger. Some ledgers bleed when you scratch them, Samuel said. Clara's hand rested on the bell rope. We offered labor and time. If your answer is maybe, say it. If it's no, say it. Ransom smiled without warmth. No. Silence tightened. Daly lifted the black ledger. This book says your men came at night when a man was dying, asked to see a deed they meant to erase, brought matches as argument. The sheriff helped them call arson weather. He's remembered better. Allegations, Ransom said. Clara laid a scrap beside the book. Pike says burn the deed. The ink had sweated and still read. Pike stared at it. I said it in a way that let me pretend I hadn't. I thought a woman with no paper would have to talk to me. I was wrong. If I keep this badge, it's because you're kinder than I deserve. From the far side of the Cottonwood came the sound Dustwater now knew. A match struck with care. Binks stepped from the split in the trunk, small flame cupped in his hand. Talk tires, men, he said. Fire moves them. Two of his men rose with rags and bottles. Women drew children behind them and set their jaws. Men found there were fewer guns here than opinions about when to use them. Samuel didn't reach for his Colt. He stepped between Ransom and the Cottonwood, where his shadow crossed Binks's. Put it out, he said. Not for me. For the wind. Binks rolled the flame, amused. You had your porch last night, he said, lifting his hand to throw. Clara yanked the bell rope. The church in town answered thin and late enough. Pike's shot snapped, not at Binks's chest but his wrist. The match jumped and died. Keene's chain caught a bottle boy. Samuel bent Binks's arm, so the hidden gun clattered. Daly's spoon jabbed where hands hesitate. Ezra drew and shouted. The crowd had already chosen. When it settled, the rag bottle lay smashed in dust. Binks knelt, breathing hard. Pike's gun was lowered. Grief sat on his face. Ransom's expression slid from contempt to calculation. Arson and assault, Ezra said. You'll come with me. Today, Binks said. Tomorrow the company brings men who don't make ceremony of what they enjoy. Ransom tugged his glove. We will return with authority sufficient to our needs. I'll telegraph. Send it from my store, Daly said. I like to watch wires try to talk without blushing. He mounted. Ezra rode with them because marshals sometimes have to keep men from enjoying their jobs. When the dust settled, danger hadn't gone. It had changed posture. We've bought a day, Samuel told Clara. Maybe two. Sometimes, A day is the difference between a rumor and a plan, she said. Pike bound the map and looked steadier. I leave for Laramie now. I'll carry the alternative in your names. Bring back a signature, Daly said, already turning pages. The subscription runs today. Clara closed Thomas's book. If they come with law that smells like money, she said to Samuel, I'll put the well and draw into a commons. Not on their paper, on ours. The seam sleeps. Only you and Keene know it. But water and grass can be owned by a promise. Not tis serve all. It'll make you poor on paper, he said. I'm already poor on paper, she answered. I'd like to be rich somewhere else. By afternoon, Pike had a roll of signatures that would make a clerk swear. He clasped Samuel's hand. If I don't come back, see whether the next man can carry the badge without believing it belongs to him. I'll see, Samuel said. Evening peeled away the town, one wagon at a time. Lanterns were set low, trip rope reset. Keene took the ridge. Daly left 2 boys to sleep in turns. The moon climbed and forgot to. Samuel sat on the porch step watchful, unwilling to admit he was thinking of staying past spring. Ransom came late with 5 men and a writ. Ezra was absent, either wisely or not. Under authority of the territory, and Brannan and Co., Ransom called from the gate. We claim right of way. Vacate the porch. Clara stepped into the lantern wash. The sheriff carries the territory. The governor carries arguments to their end. You carry paper with your name larger than your conscience. We won't be delayed by theatrics. He lifted his hand. 4 men moved and hit the trip line. Keene's chain spoke once. From the hay, Daly's boy called an agent by name and debt, and shame slowed his arm. Samuel put a shoulder into a collarbone. Writ and nerve dropped together. Resistance will go poorly at the assizes, Ransom called, holding the writ like a sacrament. There will be no assizes, Clara said, calm. There will be a map carried to Laramie by a man you cannot afford to martyr. There will be subscriptions and neighbors. There will be no burning. Then a train will bend, a bell will ring for it, and children will count cars without knowing we fought for how they move. Hooves and wheels cut the road lanterns high. Pike hauled up, breathless, tube in hand. Order from Laramie, he said, thrusting a packet. Temporary injunction on your route. Governor's seal. Alternate to be surveyed at once with county labor and company oversight. Compensation table revised to consider mineral exposure. Sheriff's authority affirmed. He grinned. And a note. Tell Ransom to stop writing letters like he owns the Bible. Ransom read. Went a color that would look better on a horse. Stalling tactic. We will appeal. Appeal while cutting south, Pike said. Survey crews 2 days out. Keene, be polite. I'll teach them dirt etiquette, Keene said. Ransom gathered what dignity he could, pointed at Clara because he had to. We are not finished. No, Clara said. But we are not burning. They left in a line that wanted to be straight and failed on small points, as pride does. Dew cool quiet dropped. Keene clapped Pike's shoulder. Samuel sat and felt a wind crack something loss had sealed in him years ago. Clara leaned the rifle back and wore a light that wouldn't burn out soon. Stay, she said simple, promising nothing more than it asked. All right, he answered. South fence first. Then the corral. Then whatever roof thinks it's smarter than weather. We'll argue about the order, she said. That will be our trouble. Morning found Dustwater halfway to a new history. Survey boys arrived awkward and apologetic, set to work beside men who knew how to make earth do as asked. Daly fed 15 with what would feed 5 for anyone else. Keene hammered until his arm forgot how to stop. Ezra told Ransom in public to learn locals' names before inconveniencing them. Pike stood with hands behind his back and watched a bend get explained to men whose maps had never imagined one. Samuel carried wire to the south fence beginning, as men like him do, with what holds a thing together. He kept 2 small spikes in his pocket, honest metal ready to become whatever work required. He set them in the porch lintel out of habit. At dusk he found Clara with Thomas's book closed on her lap. They'll name this curve, she said. A child will ask why the train hums this way outside Dustwater. Someone will say it hums for a woman who kept her porch. When there were gate for watered, 60 for hind. And for a town that remembered it had one, Samuel said. And for a man who decided wandering is useful only if you know where to end it. Here is good, he said. The Cottonwood moved like a blessing. The church bell rang once because the boy pulling it had dozed and remembered time that way. The dog dreamed with twitching paws that weren't a warning. Wind came with softened edges, the feel of humans behaving. Months later, the first train took the bend. People stood with hats off, greeting it like a cousin who'd learned manners. The whistle sounded attentive. Children miscounted cars and were not corrected. Daly cried and scolded herself. Keene laughed aloud and apologized to no one. Pike smiled without looking at anyone. Clara and Samuel stood apart, as they tended to in public. She watched the iron move where it had been told to. "It hums," she said. "For you," he said. "And over no one." She took his hand without looking. He let her. The train rounded out and slid toward Dustwater's next day. Smaller, respectful, useful. The Cottonwood laid down shade that fit everyone who chose to stand in it. Stories end elsewhere than days. This one ends where an honest Western should. A town held together not by a single bullet but by many hands. A woman kept her porch. A man learned staying put can be a frontier as wide as any he'd ridden. The land kept the bells sound. The rail kept the memory of the curve. And night, when it came clean. If the tale of Clara Whitmore, Samuel Hart, and the town of Dustwater has stirred something in you, then you know the frontier was never just about land or iron. It was about people fragile yet unbending, flawed yet unyielding, who chose to stand when everything pushed them to bow. In the Old West, nothing came easy, least of all truth and belonging. But every fire doused, every secret faced, every hand that joined another under the Cottonwood proved that community can be stronger than fear, and that staying rooted can be braver than riding away. Subscribe and ride with me into the next story, where a whisper can change a destiny, where law and greed wrestle in the dust, and where hope bends but never breaks. Because the truest Old West stories are the ones that still hum long after the guns have gone quiet.